Hi there, Alison here with another Cab Franc du jour. Today's wine is taking us to the Las Compuertas GI in Luján de Cuyo in Mendoza, Argentina. And we're looking at the Durigutti 2021 Proyecto Las Compuertas Cabernet Franc. Durigutti Family Winemakers was established in 2002 by brothers Pablo and Héctor Durigutti. They're organically farming 40 hectares of vines in the heart of the Las Compuertas GI in the region of Lujan de Cuyo. And they're also working with key grower partners in select subregions in Luján de Cuyo, the Uco Valley, and eastern Mendoza. Cabernet Franc is central to the Durigutti story, as they were one of the first producers in the country to bottle Cabernet Franc as a single varietal wine back in 2010. And today, they're making 4 different expressions of the variety, including their entry-level and reserva Cabernet Francs, and these are blends from across multiple parcels in Luján de Cuyo and the Uco Valley. And from their 3 hectares of Cabernet Franc vines planted at their estate vineyard in Las Compuertas, they're making a Cabernet Franc Rosé. And also, perhaps the most exciting addition to their lineup of Cabernet Francs is the Proyecto Las Compuertas Cabernet Franc, which is what we're looking at today. Now, it has been some time since I have featured a Cabernet Franc from Argentina, so it's worth taking a moment to look at the Cabernet Franc picture here. As of 2023, there was around 1,858 hectares of Cabernet Franc vines planted in Argentina, and this represents less than 1% of the area under vine in the country. But despite these very tiny plantings, Cabernet Franc has significant momentum across the country, with nearly 1,200 hectares of new Cabernet Franc plantings going in the ground in Argentina in the last 10 years. And I can say confidently that there is no other region in the world that is planting Cabernet Franc at this rate. So you can imagine my enthusiasm and optimism for the future of Cabernet Franc in Argentina. Now, today's example of Argentinian Cabernet Franc is taking us to the Las Compuertas GI in the region of Lujan de Cuyo. And Lujan de Cuyo begins about 10 kilometers south of the city of Mendoza and stretches about 45 kilometers to the south. And this proximity to the city of Mendoza meant that this was not only one of the first regions in the country to be cultivated to grapevines as far back as the 16th century, but it was also the first region to be elevated to DOC status in 1989. And that made it the epicenter for the quality revolution that soon followed, beginning in the mid-1990s and continuing through the Malbec boom of the early 2000s. And indeed, Malbec is central to the identity of Luján de Cuyo. In fact, there's more Malbec planted here than in all of France. Now, that said, it is an important region for Cabernet Franc, or at least an emerging region for Cabernet Franc. And while the plantings of Cabernet Franc are relatively minuscule here, it is the 5th most planted variety overall, and there's around 405 hectares of Cabernet Franc vines planted here in Luján de Cuyo. And that actually represents just a little over 1/4 of all of the Cabernet Franc planted in Mendoza. Now, in terms of the viticultural environment across Luján de Cuyo, there is quite a bit of diversity, but in general, the climate would be considered warm continental with relatively low rainfall. And as is the case across many of the wine-growing regions in Argentina, elevation and the proximity of the region to the Andes Mountains has a huge impact on that region's microclimate. And looking at Luján de Cuyo, there's actually a very wide range in elevation, as low as 690 meters above sea level in the easternmost part of the region to upwards to around 1,200 meters above sea level in the westernmost part of the region. And because of this diversity, this has led to the establishment of several subregions, but only 2 of which have official GI status, Agrelo and Las Compuertas. And Las Compuertas is a relatively small region. There's only about 425 hectares under vine. But despite its size, it is widely considered one of the great crus of Luján de Cuyo and Mendoza, thanks in part to the work of the Durigutti brothers as one of the founders of this region and the champion of its terroir for more than 2 decades. Now, Las Compuertas is located in the westernmost part of Lujan de Cuyo, tucked up in the foothills of the Andes, and the Mendoza River marks the southern border. And this westerly position in Lujan de Cuyo has a lot of advantages and impacts on the region's terroir. First and foremost, because we are tucked up in the foothills of the Andes here, we have vineyards at a much higher elevation than what we typically see across Lujan de Cuyo. And the elevation ranges from around 950 meters above sea level to upwards to around 1,080 meters above sea level. This elevation contributes to a wider diurnal range in temperatures, so while the daytime temperatures are quite warm, they are offset by significantly cooler evening temperatures. This helps to slow down ripening and preserve acidities. And in fact, Las Compuertas is one of the coolest subregions in Lujan de Cuyo. It's cooler than both Agrelo and Perdriel. And author Amanda Barnes, who wrote the South American Wine Guide, noted that the coolness of Las Compuertas contributes to the wines here in that these are really the most finesse-driven and fresh-driven, acid-driven wines of Lujan de Cuyo compared to Agrelo and Perdriel, which tend to be more powerful and structured wines. Now, this westerly position also means that this region receives the water from the snowmelt from the Andes first, so it has an abundance of water supply for irrigation purposes. In fact, Las Compuertas translates to English to mean floodgates. Finally, this western position in the foothills of the Andes means that there is a much greater diversity of soils across the region. And these are the soils, these are alluvial and fluvial soils that have been brought down by the rivers from the mountains. And the soils we have here have a higher concentration of these larger river stones, these round river stones, also calcareous materials and clays. And because of the diversity of the soils, this has led to many producers actually identifying smaller plots within their vineyards to do micro expressions to showcase the diversity across the Las Compuertas GI. And on that note, in fact, it was this diversity of terroirs that inspired the Durigutti Proyecto Las Compuertas project and this range of wines, which is a series of terroir micro-expressions of different varieties from across their vineyard in Las Compuertas. Now, in terms of the Cabernet Franc in this range, this is from a 1 hectare parcel of Cabernet Franc vines that was planted in 2015. And the vines actually were planted by Massal selection using heritage vine material, and the vines are ungrafted, so they are on their own rootstocks. And the vines were also planted at a very high density, around 9,200 vines per hectare. And according to Héctor, he said that they did this to encourage root competition, and this helps to promote the roots going down much, much deeper into the soils. And in addition to this, this also helps to control the yields in a really nice way. And the optimal yield that they're striving for the Cabernet Franc in terms of the finished wine is around 1 bottle of wine per vine. The vineyard block is at an elevation of around 1,050 meters above sea level, and it has a gentle northeast facing slope and exposure. And in terms of soils, they've done a number of different studies of their soils across their vineyard. And in terms of the Cabernet Franc block specifically, what we have here are deep, low vigor, sandy loam soils with a higher concentration of those kind of large, round river stones throughout the topsoil and subsoil. In terms of viticultural practices, they are performing selective shoot thinning, as well as shoot positioning, as well as bunch positioning to ensure optimal sun exposure. And they are practicing flood irrigation, which is the traditional form of irrigation here, which they also noted actually also helps to encourage the roots of the vines to go much deeper into the soils. Now, looking at the winemaking for this wine, the fruit is all hand harvested, it is all destemmed, optically sorted but not crushed, and the fermentation takes place in unlined concrete eggs with indigenous yeast. And the fruit does undergo a cold soak in advance of alcoholic fermentation for 1 day, and then the fermentation takes place at temperatures of around 23 to 25 degrees Celsius. The total time on skins is around 21 days, and they will do some regular pigeage during the fermentation and post-fermentation maceration. And then following this, the aging also takes place in unlined concrete eggs, and the aging is for about 8 months before bottling. So let's dive into this Cabernet Franc. So immediately the nose has a beautiful purity to it and a remarkable freshness. I would say the fruits lean much more red fruit driven. Yeah, and I'm getting like kind of crunchy red fruits, like there's a little bit of a red currant note, raspberry, a bit of morello cherry, kind of a little bit of like a cran raspberry juice thing going on. And I would say that the pyrazines and the fruit are on kind of equal footing here. And I love the herbaceous profile. It's really clean, really classic. I would say some mint. There's a little bit of rosemary here. There's almost a little bit of a foresty undertone, kind of reminiscent of like pine needles, like pine trees. It also is a really nice pepperiness to the nose as well. But in general, it's, as I said, it's very pure, very fresh. And in terms of the ripeness level, like this does not present as many of the Cabernet Francs from Argentina that I have tasted. So it is just at a really lovely ripeness level, as if you had just plucking the fruit off the bush or the tree. On the palate, I was saying really bright red fruits come through really, really nicely. There almost is a little bit more of a sweet tart thing going on in the palate, which is lovely. And even a touch more foresty as well, as if those kind of herbal and that kind of pine tree note is coming through in a really nice way on the palate. The palate is also super spicy. It's very, very peppery. Like it is literally like a mix of, I would say, Sichuan peppercorns, black peppercorns, pink peppercorns. There's even like a little bit of an Espelette pepper going on as well. But it's very spicy, very, very peppery. And I quite like that actually. The acidity on this wine is fantastic. It's bright, it's zippy, it's kind of snappy as well, quite elevated and very persistent. And it's creating this wonderful balance in the wine. Tannins are beautiful. They're low, I would say, very silky in terms of the texture, very elegant as well in terms of the tannin profile. Yeah, there's some other layers here in the wine which I quite like. There's almost a little bit of a saltiness too, which is quite nice. But in general, this is such a energetic style of Cabernet Franc. It's juicy, it's lively, it's got this wonderful approachability to it. And there is a little bit of structure here, but really this is this kind of jovial, fun, really delightful style of Cabernet Franc from Argentina. Yeah, and I love the pepperiness of this wine. It's just fantastic. It's creating this wonderful sense of momentum in the wine. And honestly, it is a little bit of a departure from most of the Cabernet Francs that I have tasted from Argentina. You know, many of them that I've had to date kind of lean a little bit more on the riper side of things. Some often have some influence of new oak or a significant portion of oak. And this is kind of the opposite of all of those. It's about juiciness, it's about approachability, it's super friendly, and it's really quite fresh as well. This clocks in at 12.5% alcohol, which don't even know if I've had a Cabernet Franc from Argentina with that low of alcohol, and I really appreciate this kind of levity and the lightness that this wine has. It's really, really lovely. Yeah, it's super fun. There's so much ease to this wine. It's very, very drinkable. It's got this kind of quaffable kind of vibe to it, and I really like it. As I said, most of the Cabernet Francs I've had from Argentina lean much more in this bold, riper style. So it's really quite refreshing to have a wine or to taste a wine that is kind of in a different style. And actually, I did message Amanda Barnes because I was curious. I said, is this kind of what is typical from this wine, as well as sort of the Durigutti approach with Cabernet Franc? And she said, absolutely. They're all about the freshness, the finesse, the elegance. And this wine is coming through like that in spades. And it's really, really quite cool. And as I alluded to at the beginning of this video, you know, there is a lot of Cabernet Franc going in the ground in Argentina. And there's a lot happening here with regards to this grape variety. And I'm super optimistic about the future of Cabernet Franc here, and with producers like Durigutti putting a lot of energy behind the variety and also showcasing it in a way that is really about purity and really trying to showcase the grape and showcase the place, I think is really, really important. I alluded to in my most recent video featuring a wine from Ontario, the Stratus Amphora Cabernet Franc, that I really appreciate when premium examples of Cabernet Franc come through and are made in a way that doesn't use oak, that tries to highlight the grape in the purest possible way. And I think they've done a really terrific job with this wine. And I recognize that the vines are pretty young. You know, they were planted in 2015, so there's a long way to go, I think, with this particular wine. And I'm excited to follow the expression of this wine over the years because I think there's some really excellent potential. And this is my first introduction to the Proyecto Las Compuertas Cabernet Franc, and it is going to be one that I am going to continue to purchase and follow over the years to come. If you've had the pleasure of tasting the Proyecto Las Compuertas Cabernet Franc from Durigutti, I would love to know what you thought of it in the comments below. Or if you have another favorite Cabernet Franc from Argentina, do let me know who the producer is and what that wine is in the comments below. And of course, as always, I'll be back again soon with another wine. Cheers.